Let me tell you something about the summer of 1965. That was the summer the whole world cracked open like an egg on the side of a hot skillet. The summer I learned that grown people lie not because they want to, but because the truth is heavier than a cast iron pot full of gumbo. And sometimes you just can't carry it by yourself. My name is Mae Frances Pettway. I am 72 years old as I speak these words to you today. But the girl in this story, that girl was 12. And she was about to find out that her grandmother, the softest, kindest woman in Wilcox County, Alabama, had been sitting on a secret big enough to split a family in two. I grew up in Chicago. That's important. Because Chicago in the 1960s was not the Deep South. Chicago was concrete and buses and the L train rattling overhead. Chicago was my mother working double shifts at the hospital, coming home with her white shoes squeaking on the linoleum. Chicago was fast and loud and didn't care much about who your people were or where they came from. But every summer, my mother packed a suitcase and put me on a Greyhound bus and sent me south. Sent me to Gee's Bend, Alabama. Sent me to my grandmother. You need to know where your backbone came from, my mother would say, standing on the curb outside the bus station, not crying because she never cried in public. Don't you forget that, Mae Frances. Your backbone didn't grow on 47th Street. It grew in that red dirt down there. I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. I thought a backbone was just bones. Something you had. Something everybody had. I was wrong. The bus ride from Chicago to Montgomery took 14 hours if you were lucky, 18 if you weren't. I was never lucky. That summer, the bus broke down outside of Nashville. Somebody's uncle came with a pickup truck and drove us the rest of the way to the Alabama line, where another bus picked us up. I ate vending machine cheese crackers for dinner, and drank warm Coke and watched the land change from flat to rolling to flat again. From city lights to truck stops to nothing but darkness and the occasional porch light flickering through the trees. I fell asleep with my head against the window. When I woke up, we were crossing the Alabama River. And there it was. Gee's Bend. If you've never been to Gee's Bend, I don't know how to describe it to you. It's a place that the maps forgot for a long time. A bend in the Alabama River so sharp that the water almost turns back on itself. A peninsula of red clay and pine trees and dirt roads that don't have names, only directions. Go past the church, turn left at the pecan grove. Keep going until you see the mailbox shaped like a catfish. The soil is the color of brick dust. The air smells like honeysuckle and creek water, and somebody's wood smoke from the night before. The people there are quilt makers, farmers, preachers, deacons, mothers who have buried children and kept on living anyway. And at the end of a long gravel driveway, past the chinaberry tree that had been struck by lightning twice and still stood, was my grandmother's house. Shotgun house, they called it. Because you could stand in the front doorway and shoot a bullet straight through the back door without hitting a thing. 3 rooms in a row. Front room with the sofa nobody sat on, middle room with the kitchen table and the wood stove, back room with 2 beds and a dresser that held the smell of mothballs and rose-scented talcum powder. The porch wrapped around the front like arms. And in a cane-bottom rocker, shelling peas into a chipped enamel bowl, sat my grandmother, Odessa Pettway. She was 73 years old that summer. But she didn't look it. She had skin the color of coffee with a little cream in it, and hands that had worked every day of her life but still moved like butterflies. Her hair was gray and pulled back in a bun so tight it pulled her eyes up at the corners. She wore a house dress floral print, faded from too many washings, and an apron that had once been white, but was now the color of dishwater. She did not get up when I got out of the car. That wasn't her way. She stopped shelling peas. She looked at me. And she smiled. "Law, look at you," she said. "You done grown again. I told your mama to stop feeding you. You gonna be taller than the pecan tree." I ran up those porch steps and hugged her. She smelled like she always smelled, like ivory soap and bacon grease and something underneath that I couldn't name. Something old and deep and patient. Like the dirt itself. "Grandma," I said into her shoulder. "I missed you." "Missed you too, baby." She patted my back, 3 quick pats. "Now go put your things in the back room, and wash them hands. We got beans to shell, and I ain't doing it all by myself." That was Grandma. She loved you. But she loved you with work. With purpose. With "Come on now, stop standing around, there's things to do." I put my suitcase on the bed in the back room, the bed that had been my mother's when she was a girl, with its chenille bedspread and the lumpy pillow that smelled like lavender. And then I went back to the porch and sat on the step below her rocker and started shelling peas. The locusts were singing. A blue jay cussed at us from the fence post. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked and another dog answered. It was good to be back. But here's what I didn't know that first morning. Here's what I wouldn't learn until later. That house was full of seeker. Part 2: The Pantry. My grandmother had a pantry. If you're from the north, you might think a pantry is a closet where you keep canned goods and boxes of macaroni. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a room. A small room. Yes, maybe 6 feet by 8 feet, but a room. It was off the kitchen, behind a door that stuck in the summer and swelled shut in the winter. You had to throw your shoulder into it to get it open. And then you had to step over the threshold quick before it closed again. Inside that room, my grandmother kept everything. Shelves lined every wall, floor to ceiling. Jars of pickled okra. Jars of pickled beets. Jars of fig preserves so dark and sweet they looked like molasses. Canned green beans, canned tomatoes, canned corn. All in mason jars with the lids sealed tight, and the dates written on masking tape in her spidery handwriting. June 1963. August 1964. May 1965. Sacks of flour and cornmeal sat on the bottom shelf, tied with string. A tin of lard the size of a small child sat on the floor. On the higher shelves, things I couldn't identify, dried herbs hanging upside down from hooks, a bundle of something that smelled like sassafras, a glass bottle full of dark liquid that she called nerve medicine, and never let anybody touch. And in the back, behind the flour sacks and the lard bucket, behind a crate of sweet potatoes that were starting to sprout, there was a wooden box. It wasn't a big box. Maybe the size of a shoebox. But it wasn't a shoebox. It was handmade, dovetailed at the corners, with a brass latch that didn't have a key because the latch was just for show. You could open it without a key. You just had to know it was there. I didn't know it was there. Not at first. The first week I was there, I did what I always did. I helped Grandma in the garden in the morning, when the sun wasn't too high and the mosquitoes hadn't gotten bold yet. We pulled weeds and picked tomatoes and argued about whether okra was better fried or boiled. Fried, obviously. Grandma said boiled. This was our longest-running disagreement. In the afternoons, when the heat was so thick you could chew it, we sat on the porch. Grandma quilted. I read. Or I pretended to read while I watched the road for anybody passing by. Not many people passed by. Mr. Abernathy in his pickup truck, bringing eggs. Sister Beatrice on her bicycle, going to the post office. Sometimes a car full of teenagers from Camden, kicking up dust and laughing at nothing. At night, after supper, we listened to the radio. The big wooden console radio that stood in the front room like a piece of furniture. We listened to WLAC out of Nashville, which played the good music, the real music, Grandma said, not that rock and roll mess. We listened to news sometimes, too. The summer of 1965 was a hard summer. You could feel it in the air, like the pressure before a storm. Selma had happened that spring. The marches, the bridge, the blood. Grandma listened to the reports with her face like stone. And when they talked about voting rights, she nodded slow, like she was hearing something she already knew. Things changing, she said one night. Not fast enough, but changing. I didn't know what to say to that. I was 12. I knew about civil rights the way I knew about algebra. It was something grown-ups talked about, something that happened somewhere else, something that didn't have much to do with shelling peas on a porch in Gee's Bend. I was wrong about that, too. It was the second week, when I found the letters. Grandma had sent me to the pantry to get a jar of pickled beets for supper. She was making pickled beets and cornbread, and a pot of greens with a ham hock in it. I was supposed to get the beets and come right back. But I got curious. That's the thing about 12-year-olds. They get curious. They open doors that should stay closed. They lift the lid on boxes that have been sitting in the dark for years, waiting for somebody brave or foolish enough to look inside. I got the beets. And then I noticed the flour sacks had shifted. There was something behind them. Something wooden. I pushed the sacks aside. There was the box. It didn't have a label. It didn't have a name. It just sat there, patient, like it had been waiting for me my whole life. I looked over my shoulder. Grandma was in the kitchen, humming something low and tuneless, stirring the greens. I opened the box. Inside, tied with a faded blue ribbon, were letters. 7 of them. The paper was yellowed, the ink was brown, and the envelopes were postmarked from a place I'd never heard of. Freedom Farm, Mississippi. I pulled out the first letter. My hands were shaking, though I didn't know why. I unfolded it carefully, because the paper felt like it might crumble if I breathed too hard. And I read, Dear Odessa, they burned the church last night. Deacon Brown's boy got his arm broke. But we registered 11 more people before the sun went down. 11 more souls who can vote now, long as they ain't too scared to show up at the courthouse. I know you told me to stop writing. You said it was too dangerous. But somebody's got to remember this. And you're the only one I trust to keep the truth. Tell James I'm coming home soon. Tell him his daddy loves him. Your husband, Caleb. I read it twice. 3 times. Your husband, Caleb. My grandmother's husband was James Pettway. James Pettway, who died in 1960, 5 years before this summer. James Pettway, my mother's father. James Pettway, whose photograph hung on the wall in the front room. A stern-faced man with a preacher's collar and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. Not Caleb. There was no Caleb on the wall. There was no Caleb in any story I'd ever been told. I put the letter back in the box. I put the flour sacks back in front of the box. I took the pickled beets to the kitchen and set them on the counter, and didn't say a word. But that night I didn't sleep. I lay in the back room, on my mother's old bed, and I stared at the ceiling and I thought about that word. Husband. My grandmother had another husband. And nobody ever told me. Part 3, the asking. I didn't ask right away. That's the other thing about being 12. You learn to wait. You learn to watch. You learn that some questions are like matches, you strike them in the wrong place, and everything goes up in flames. So I watched my grandmother. I watched her shell peas and quilt and stir greens and hum her tuneless hum. I watched her walk to the mailbox every afternoon at 4 o'clock, rain or shine, and stand there for a minute looking down the road before she came back. I watched her at night, sitting in her rocker after the radio went off, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes on something I couldn't see. She was waiting for something. Or someone. I just didn't know what. The third week I couldn't hold it anymore. It was a Thursday. Thursday was wash day. Grandma and I hauled the big cast iron pot out to the backyard, built a fire under it, and boiled the sheets and towels and my grandfather's old shirts that she still washed even though he'd been dead 5 years. The steam rose up in the humidity and mixed with the smoke from the fire, and the whole backyard smelled like lye soap and history. We were hanging the sheets on the line, me on one end, her on the other, when I finally said it. Grandma. Who's Caleb? The sheet stopped moving. Grandma's hands stopped pinning. The whole world stopped, I swear to God. Even the locusts held their breath. She didn't look at me. She looked at the sheet. Then she unpinned it, smoothed it out, and pinned it again, careful and slow. Where you hear that name? I found the letters. In the pantry. Behind the flour. She was quiet for a long time. A blue jay landed on the fence post, screamed at us, flew away. The fire crackled in the pot. Somewhere down the road, a screen door slammed. "Law," she said finally. "Just that. Law." Then she took my hand, the one that wasn't holding a clothespin, and led me to the porch. "Sit down, baby," she said. "This gonna take a while." Part 4. The telling. She sat in her rocker. I sat on the step. She picked up the bowl of peas. She was always shelling something, always working, even when she was telling the biggest story of her life. And then she began. "Caleb Pettway was my husband," she said. "Your grandfather's younger brother. But Grandpa James was my husband too." She shelled a pea, dropped it in the bowl, shelled another. "We was sisters before we was wives. Me and James's first wife Lorene. Grew up together, went to the same one-room school, got baptized in the same creek on the same Sunday. She was like a sister to me, and when she married James, I was her maid of honor." She smiled a little, remembering. "Lorene was beautiful. I mean, stop you in your tracks, beautiful. Had a laugh like a bell, and she was always laughing. James couldn't keep his hands off her, and she couldn't keep her hands off him. They had 2 babies in 3 years, and she was pregnant with the third when she got sick." "Sick with what?" "TB. Consumption, they called it then. She coughed for 6 months. By the time the doctor came out from Camden, it was too late. She died in the spring of '58. Left James with 3 children under the age of 5 and a grief so heavy he couldn't lift his head." She paused. Shelled another pea. "That's where I came in. I wasn't married then. I was 26 years old and I thought I was in love with a boy named Samuel from across the river, but that didn't work out. So when James needed help with those babies, I went. I cooked and cleaned and changed diapers and read bedtime stories. I did what needed to be done." She set the bowl down, wiped her hands on her apron. "But here's the thing, Mae Frances. James had a twin brother, Caleb. And Caleb had been gone for 2 years by then. He'd gone up north to Detroit, worked in a factory, sent money home every month. And when he heard about Lorene dying, he came back. To help James. To help the children. To help me. Her voice changed when she said his name. Caleb. It got softer. Younger. Like she was 26 again, standing in a kitchen with a man who looked at her like she was the only light in the dark. We fell in love fast, she said. Too fast. People talked. But we didn't care. We got married in the fall of '58, right there in Mount Zion, with the leaves turning and the whole church watching. James stood up with us. He was happy for us. He was. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a folded photograph. Handed it to me. It showed two young men in army uniforms, laughing at something just out of frame. They had the same jaw, the same eyes, the same smile. One was slightly taller. That was the only difference. The Pettway twins, she said. Caleb and James. Looked just alike, didn't they? I looked at the photo. They could have been mirrors. What happened? I asked. She took the photo back. Folded it. Put it in her pocket. 1961, she said. That's what happened. The Freedom Riders came through. The movement was spreading like fire. And Caleb had always been the restless one, the one who couldn't sit still when something was wrong. He started going to meetings. Then he started organizing meetings. Then he left. Left where? Mississippi. He said somebody had to stand up. He said he had two good legs and a stronger will than fear. He said he'd be back in a month. She laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. That was 4 years ago, Mae Frances. He never came back. Not to stay. He wrote letters. He wrote letters. She nodded. Dozens of them. I kept everyone. And everyone said the same thing: I love you. I miss you. I'm doing important work. I'll be home soon. But soon never came. Part 5: The Choice. Here's where the story gets complicated. Here's where you have to understand that people do things for reasons you can't see from the outside. In 1962, James's wife had been dead for 4 years. He was raising 3 children alone. My mother was the youngest, just a toddler when Lorene died. He was exhausted. He was lonely. And he had been watching me take care of his babies, day after day, week after week, month after month. He asked me to marry him. I said no. At first. Because I was still married to Caleb. Because I still loved Caleb. Because I believed he was coming home. But Caleb wrote me a letter in the spring of 1963. A letter I never showed anybody. Not until now. She reached into the pocket of her apron, the other pocket, and pulled out a single envelope. This one wasn't tied with the blue ribbon. This one was folded and refolded until the paper was soft as cloth. You read it, she said. Read it out loud. I opened it. The handwriting was the same as the letters in the pantry: careful, educated. A man who'd learned to write in a one-room school and practiced until his letters looked like printing. My dearest Odessa, I am not coming home. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The work here is too important, and I cannot walk away from it. Every day we register voters. Every night we sleep with one eye open. The Klan is everywhere. The sheriff is the Klan. But we are winning, Odessa. Slowly we are winning. You deserve a husband who can hold you at night. You deserve a life that isn't waiting. James needs you. The children need you. And if I am being honest with myself, I think you need them too. Marry him. Please. Not because I don't love you, God knows I love you more than my own life. But because love sometimes means letting go. Love sometimes means saying, Go be happy somewhere else, because I can't make you happy here. I will write when I can. I will come home when the work is done. But I release you from your vows to me. You are free, Odessa. Go live. Forever yours. Caleb. I finished reading. My hands were shaking again. He came home that Christmas, Grandma said. Christmas Eve, 1963. Walked up that driveway with a sack of oranges and a doll for the babies. Stayed one night. Slept on the sofa. And the next morning he looked me in the eye and said, "You gonna marry James or not?" "What did you say?" I said yes. She picked up the bowl of peas, set it down again. I said yes because Caleb was right. I deserved a husband who was there. And James deserved somebody to help him raise those children. And those children deserved a mother who wasn't a ghost. She married James in January of 1964. Small ceremony, just the family. Caleb didn't come. But he sent a letter. Congratulations, it said. Take care of them. And then he went back to Mississippi. Back to the work. Back to Freedom Farm. For next part, write and comment next. Thanks for coming on site.